All right, we're going to start with Chapter 2 today, and Chapter 2 begins with scatter plots. And what we're going to find out is what is a scatter plot and what does it display. And this is something that might be somewhat familiar to you because it was covered in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 if you had those classes. So a scatter plot is the most effective way to display the relationship between two quantitative, let me zoom in on that, variables on the same individual. Explanatory variable is the variable you examine first that you believe might determine a relationship to the second variable. And then the horizontal axis, think of it as the x part. Okay, that's the explanatory variable. The response variable is the variable that is possibly the outcome. Okay, this is the one depends on. So think of like if we had hours studying versus the grades you receive, right? So your grade depends on the hours you study. So the hours studying is the explanatory variable, and the response variable is the grade you get. So the hours you study kind of determines how well you do on something. And the vertical axis is where we put this outcome, where we put the response variable, and that is the y in the ordered pair. So a lot of things you can think of in your daily life depend on things like, so the amount of time you work can determine how much money you make if you get paid hourly, things like that. So for example, identify the explanatory and response variables in the following. They tell us that alcohol has many effects in the body. One effect is a drop in body temperature. To study this effect, researchers gave several amounts of alcohol to mice and measured the changes in body temperature. Which variable is the explanatory variable and which variable is the response variable? So the explanatory variable is what determines the response variable. So in this case, we have alcohol and we have body temperature. And we're actually saying drop in body temperature. So in this one, which one is determined by the other? So based on what they're saying is the explanatory variable is the x value, and the response, or the y value, is the drop in body temperature, because the drop in body temperature is depending on the alcohol. So if there's no alcohol in the mice, the body temperature won't drop. But the more alcohol they have, it can drop their body temperature. So the explanatory is the alcohol, and the drop in body temperature response. Another way you can think of it as, how can you explain the drop in body temperature? You can see if the mice drank alcohol. So part B says, let's say I collect the ACT scores for all graduating seniors this year at Logan High School and examine their math and English scores. Which would be the explanatory and which would be the response variable? So do the ACT scores for graduating seniors, and you're looking at their math and their English, is there something that explains another thing? Like, do math and English explain the ACT score? Or does the ACT score explain math or English? There's not really a connection, is there? So this one is just not enough info. And that can happen. Sometimes people try to do studies and they really don't have enough to determine something. So we're just going to say, right now, there's not enough info to determine which one would be the response and the explanatory. Okay. And then part C, using the same ACT scores, as the last example for seniors at Logan High. And if you believe there was a relationship between the two variables where you believed you could predict the math score if you knew the English score. So they're saying you know the English score, and based on the English score, you can predict the math score. So if they say this, we're looking at English score. And we're looking at math score. If they're saying that the English score can determine the math score. The English score can determine the math score. Which one is dependent on the other? So if you know the English score, that's what we start with. That will be our explanatory, or the X value. And the response variable is going to be like the output is what we're getting. That's the math score. So they're saying, if you know English, we can tell you what math is. So the one you know to start with is explanatory. The one you're going to find out, or the one that's dependent, is the response, so the math score. All right, example 2 says, the local ice cream shop keeps track of how much ice cream they sell versus the temperature on that day. People believe the temperature affects sales. The figures for the last 12 days are given. Make a scatter plot of the data. So it tells the temperature and it tells the ice cream sales. Okay, so which one is our X and which one's our Y? So which one is dependent on the other? Does temperature affect sales, or does the ice cream sales change the temperature? We're going to go with X is temperature, Y is ice cream. So temperature in degrees Celsius. And we're going to go sales, money sign for sales. So for the temperature, this will work out if we go from 10 up to 26. So if we go 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. And then on the side, we'll start with 0 sales, $100, $200, $300, $400, $500, and up to $600. That should cover the numbers. So the first one is 14.2 degrees and $215. So 14.2 and then go up to 215. And again, this is just a rough estimate, so it's going to be right about there. Okay, and the second one, 16.4 up to 325. 0.4, 325. Then 11.9, so not quite 12, and 185. 15.2, 332. 18.5, 406. All the way up to here. And again, just a rough estimate. 22.1 and 522. 19.4 and 412. 25.1 and 614. 25.1 all at the 614, which is just above here. 23.4 and 544. Right about there. 18.1, 421. 22.6, 445. And 17.2, 408. 17.2, 408. All right, so based on the graph, you can see, I'm going to go with a different color here. You can see that these dots go up from left to right. So clearly, as the temperature gets bigger, the sales increase. So there's definitely an impact, temperature, on sales. Okay, so this is what scatter plots can show us. They can give us a direct picture of how something can affect another variable. So how does temperature affect the sales? Well, the temperature has some effect on causing the sales to go up. The hotter the temperature, the more sales in ice cream there are.